Greetings, Fright fans, and welcome to the lab. I'm Dr. Gangrene, Nashville, Tennessee horror host. Today we're going to do another countdown, this time paying tribute to one of my all-time favorite directors, George Romero. I'm going to rank all the films of Romero from worst to first, or actually least to most favorite, taking a brief look at each along the way. Now, George began his career in advertising, making films for various clients in the Pittsburgh area. In 1968, he, along with a group of investors, fellow creatives, and friends, decided to make a horror movie. That film was Night of the Living Dead.
Night of the Living Dead.
And the rest is history. So now, without further ado, are the films of George Romero ranked worst to first. All right, first up, or last place here, is, coming in at number 17, Survival of the Dead. A group of AWOL soldiers, plus a stray teenager who joins them, make their way to an island where two families, the Muldoons and the O'Flynns, are carrying on an ages-old feud. Like a post-apocalyptic Hatfields and McCoys, complete with full-on Irish accents.
The way the Muldoons have outnumbered the O'Flynns from the beginning.
The zombie curse is in full swing here too, of course. The leader of one group wants to destroy the zombies. The leader of the other believes that they can be rehabilitated. And therein lies the crux of the story. I found the warring clans plot a bit lackluster. The biggest problem for me, however, is that the dead are just not scary in this one at all. They've become almost an afterthought. One so quickly and easily disposed of that they're little threat. And the living folks are not intimidated by them in the least. There's also some unfortunate CGI in this one that just doesn't work. It's a far cry from the glory days of dawn and day practical effects. I'm thinking of a scene of severed head that are on stakes in particular that was Sci-Fi Channel quality bad. On rewatch, I felt the same as the first time I saw this one. While it was good to have another Romero film, I just wish it had a storyline I actually cared about. All right, coming in at number 16 is Bruiser. This movie is a bit of a mess that makes less sense the further you go along. A milquetoast ad exec finds his life turned upside down. His wife is screwing his boss, his best friend is embezzling his cash, even his maid is stealing from him. His face literally becomes a blank slate as he fights to regain his identity, murdering those who wronged him. No more Mr. Nice Guy. You know, I really wanted to like this one. I even hosted it on my old TV show on the CW in Nashville. It was part of a package of films that the station supplied. But unfortunately, I just couldn't get into it, mostly due to the story by Romero. By the time you get to the Halloween party at the end of the film, it's just become a complete mess. On the plus side, though, there's some good things going for it. Tom Atkins appears as a cop on the case. I also do like the comic book sensibility about it, something you'll see time and again on this list of Romero films. And the Michael Graves era Misfits performing at the party is pretty cool too, but just not enough so to save it. Oh, and there's a god-awful cover of Take On Me in the end credits that's just horrendous too. Half skull deduction right there. What the hell was that all about? That has nothing to do with Romero or Bruiser.
Nope, it's all me. I've been working on my image.
Anyway, coming in at number 15 is Diary of the Dead. Romero revisits the outbreak of the zombie apocalypse in this one, following a fresh group of survivors as they try to make their way among the chaos. Amongst the group is a documentarian who decides to keep the cameras rolling to capture the entire event. Romero tackles themes of non-stop social media, 24-hour news coverage, misinformation, and fake news in this one. It's kind of ahead of his times there. He peppers in his usual mistrust of the government and authority as well. An interesting experiment. This one wasn't shot in Romero's usual style. It eschews the bigger budget stylizations of Day or Land of the Dead in favor of handheld video technique, making this one feel akin to the first film, oddly, in some ways, in particular the news segments, but very different in tone and style. It's an interesting film that's a bit hit or miss, but worth a look.
What happened?
It hurts. Bite. It hurts.
All right, coming in at number 14 is There's Always Vanilla. You know, I'd heard bad things about this one going in, but never got around to watching it until recently. This is Romero's second feature, made 3 years after Night of the Living Dead. It's a quirky outlier in his filmography in that it isn't horror or sci-fi. It's a drama about young people struggling with relationships and their place in society. It has that indie vibe present in early Romero films, of which I'm a big fan of, to be honest. They're so deeply Pittsburgh rooted where they were shot. They have a look and feel all their own. Romero's hippie sensibilities are in full display in this one. Vanilla is very much a product of its time, the swinging 70s, and I dug it. Several Romero regulars pop up in this one, including Judith Ridley, Raymond Lane, Bill Hensman, and George Casana. Far from Romero's worst, contrary to reports. All right, coming in at number 13 is The Dark Half. You know, I'd only seen this one once, years ago, and I remember I wasn't too impressed with it at the time. I was looking forward to watching it again, though, to give it another chance. A writer named Thad Beaumont, played by Timothy Hutton, unwittingly wheels the dark half of his personality into physical existence, with murderous consequences. Oh, and there's a flashback sequence with a partially formed twin living within the skull of Thad when he was a child. When doctors go to surgically remove the fetus, they find it's still alive. You know, I thought that part was pretty goofy the first time I watched this. In the scene, the eye of the twin pops open within Tad's exposed brain. And I found it to be so again, to be honest. And there's the appearance of thousands of sparrows at times throughout the film, harbingers of psychic activity. This is a film of dualities, a doppelganger story of sorts with a psychic twist. The effects are decent, and Romero does a good job making the action move along, but this one is ultimately undermined by the silly storyline based on a Stephen King novel that just doesn't quite translate to the big screen. Not a horrible film, and it has its moments overall that are good, but again, overall it just didn't quite work for me.
You just stop this. Stop whatever it is that you're doing here.
I'm not doing anything, Hoss. I'm just waiting around to see how things turn out.
Okay, coming in at number 12 now is Season of the Witch. Romero's second film after Night of the Living Dead is about a bored and neglected housewife who turns to witchcraft to fill the void in her life. She also begins an affair with a college professor who had previously slept with her daughter. This is another drama/character study, much like There's Always Vanilla, made the year before this, except this one has a supernatural element to it as well.
To me tonight.
Initially released under the title Jack's Wife, this one is ultimately about female empowerment and women's lib, a hot topic at the time. As with all these early Romero films, it has a total indie feel, shot in real-life settings with local Pittsburgh actors. I think Romero struggled to find a direction with these two films before returning to horror with his next picture.
Chalice, thurible, knives, they're all witches' tools, you know.
Oh, I'm just interested in it.
You're kidding.
Coming in at number 11 is The Amusement Park. This is a fascinating short film from director George Romero, set entirely in an amusement park. It uses the park as a stand-in for society, spotlighting the abuse of the elderly as they are overlooked, ignored, and mistreated. Lincoln Mazel stars in this one and is terrific. He would appear in another Romero film, Martin, 5 years later. You know, I was stoked to learn a previously unseen Romero film was surfacing. Made in 1973, this is an educational film commissioned by the Lutheran Church as a statement on elder abuse and mistreatment. It has an odd runtime of 53 minutes. Not quite a feature film, but not quite as short either. Kind of like a novelette. I can't help but think the Lutherans were shocked when they got a look at this one. It's got a very dark, depressing, and downright creepy tone to it. It's playing on Shudder currently, and I've already watched it 3 times. You know, I wish there were a couple more Romero works that would mysteriously surface. This was a real treat.
There's nothing out there. I'll see for myself.
All right, coming in at number 10 is Monkey Shines. This one was better than I remembered. A quadriplegic man named Alan, played by Jason Bage, is given a monkey companion named Ella that is trained to assist in daily activities. Only problem is, unbeknownst to him, the animal is a test subject of his friend Jeffrey, played by John Pankow, a research scientist who has been injecting the monkey with an experimental drug that causes it to become extremely intelligent and telepathically linked to Alan, and violent. This one has a real comic book sensibility to it, once again, from the story based on a novel by Michael Stewart and screenplay by Romero, right down to the framing of certain shots, particularly the action scenes. Romero really embraced his EC Comics influences in this period of his career, the 1980s, and I am here for it. This is also Christine Forrest, Romero's wife at the time. This is her best role as the insensitive and irritable Nurse Hodges, an underrated and overlooked Romero film with some really well-trained and cute simian actors. By the way, there's a funny incident. While watching this one this time around, my dog Bella heard Alan in the movie say, "Ella, want to go out?" and jumped up and stared at me. Needless to say, we had to take a break at that point in the movie.
Get rid of that bird, or so help me.
You what?
All right, coming in now at number 9 is Two Evil Eyes. George Romero and Dario Argento split directing duties on this 1990 anthology horror film. I've talked about this one on here before. It stars Adrienne Barbeau as Jessica, the wife of elderly millionaire Ernest Valdemar, played by Bingo O'Malley. Valdemar is on his deathbed and being attended to by Dr. Robert Hoffman, played by Rami Zeta. Jessica and Dr. Hoffman are having an affair and intend to split the estate once Valdemar passes. Hoffman is keeping Valdemar under a hypnotic trance, forcing him to sign altered wills, leaving all the money to Jessica, much to the chagrin of the family lawyer, played by E.G. Marshall. However, before they can collect, Valdemar dies, but since he's in a trance, his soul is trapped within his corpse, and he's unable to truly die. Argento's story is based on Poe's The Black Cat and stars Harvey Keitel and Madeline Potter. Both stories were shot in Pittsburgh, and the makeup effects were done by Tom Savini, who also appears briefly in the Black Cat segment as a crazed killer. Both tales in this one are excellent, but I particularly like the Romero segment. It has a real comic book sensibility to it, something I mentioned earlier in the video that you would see time and again in Romero's work through the years. And this one also feels just like an old EC Comics story, with its themes of moral justice, revenge, and comeuppance.
Jessica, they're coming for you.
All right, coming in at number 8 now is Land of the Dead. Romero's 4th entry in this Dead series is a really solid film that you just don't hear people talk about that often, unfortunately. In this one, a group of social elites have commandeered a giant skyscraper, turning it into a paradise for the wealthy while the rest of society lives in slums surrounding the building. Romero really explores class warfare in this one, between the rich and the poor, as well as the humans and the dead. The ultimate have and have-nots. Just whose land is it now? This one looks really good, with great production value and design on the zombie characters. Much of the film is shot at night, which adds to the creep factor for the dead. There are several neat cameos in this one, including Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright, Tom Savini, Greg Nicotero, and Romero's daughter. A really interesting cast that does a great job. Asia Argento, John Leguizamo, Dennis Hopper, Simon Baker. You know, I've always liked this one from the time I saw it in the theater all the way through to now. Glad to see it still holds up really well 17 years later.
Zombies, man. They creep me out.
All right, coming in at number 7 now is Night This is a really interesting and fun early 80s Romero film. The story follows a traveling Renaissance troupe featuring a jousting tournament of motorcycle riding knights in full armor as the highlight of their show. As with so many of Romero's earlier films, the story is more about the characters and their relationships than the action going on. Stars Ed Harris, Amy Ingersoll, Patricia Tallman, Gary Leite, and Tom Savini. Even Stephen King and wife Tabitha King pop up in a cameo, along with many other Romero regulars. The troupe functions very much like a hippie commune with its own set of rules and values. Their idyllic community begins to crumble, however, when modern society intrudes. All right, coming in at number 6 now is The Crazies. AKA codename Trixie. After a military plane crash, the small town of Evans City, Pennsylvania becomes infected with a viral plague, a quick-spreading experimental bioweapon created by the government that causes people to go mad and turn violent. The military establishes martial law and quarantines the citizens, a handful of which resist, and things quickly turn violent. Romero's nightmare scenario is eerily relevant in the age of COVID. Shot in the small town of Evans City with a cast of unknowns, it's a true indie film, made almost a decade before Romero's Hollywood period, working with bigger budgets and professional actors. I really love these earlier works. They have Romero's fingerprints all over them. Some vintage Romero themes pop up here, including mistrust of authority and the military, and a bleak outlook on humanity. This is a good one.
The Crazies.
Okay, this is the point in the countdown where things can start to get contentious. These next 5 films, for me, are all 5 Skull films. They're perfect films. I could actually switch the order of these depending on my mood for the day. So I'm ranking them based on how I feel at the time of watching these movies and making this list. Ask me again next week and it might change. Anybody could say these next 5 films are their favorite Romero movie, and I wouldn't argue with you. They're all amazing movies. So, coming in at number 5 is Day of the Dead. This is a great movie. A dozen survivors are holed up in an underground military bunker, hiding from hordes of zombies above ground. The group is split evenly between soldiers and scientists. Among them is Dr. Logan, aka Frankenstein, who believes the zombies can be rehabilitated. The military men are running out of patience, however, especially when he starts using their own dead as test subjects. Lori Cardille, daughter of famed horror host Chilly Billy Cardille, stars and does a terrific job, as do all of the cast, honestly. Great practical effects in this one that really hold up well. One of Romero's best films, from the terrific John Harrison score to the amazing special effects, engaging story, and great characters. All right, coming in at number 4 now is Martin. Martin is a very disturbed young man. Believing himself to be a vampire, he follows young women home, injects them with a sedative, and drinks their blood after cutting open a vein with a razor blade. He moves to Pittsburgh to live with his superstitious older cousin Cuda, who believes in the ways of the old country and is convinced Martin is a vampire, calling him Nosferatu. Martin is played by John Amplas, and his cousin Cuda is played by Lincoln Mazel, who starred in Romero's short film The Amusement Park. Special effects are by Tom Savini, who also appears in this film, as does Christine Forrest, Romero's future wife at the time. This is one of the quirkiest and most unique vampire tales out there. It is interspliced with black and white sequences of Martin's twisted imagination. Or are they remembrances of the past? It features a moody, synth-driven soundtrack from composer Donald Rubinstein that really matches and even enhances Romero's artsy script. So, is Martin really a vampire? Watch and judge for yourself. All right, coming in at number 3 now is Dawn of the Dead. 10 years after his iconic film Night of the Living Dead, Romero brought us the sequel, Dawn of the Dead. This time around, the zombie plague is still raging, and a quartet of survivors find sanctuary in a shopping mall. What initially seems a paradise of all they could ever want, still somehow doesn't bring them happiness. Our characters, Stephen, Flyboy, played by David Emge, Peter, played by Ken Foray, Roger, played by Scott Renninger, and Francine, played by Galen Ross, discover they must fight off threats from the surrounding zombie horde as well as bands of marauding humans to try to survive. Romero tackles themes of consumerism and greed this time around, both with the humans' consumption of worldly possessions and stuff, as well as the undead consumption of human flesh, and the mall was the perfect backdrop to do it in. This one features some truly spectacular special effects from effects wizard Tom Savini, as well as those quiet moments of reflection and character interaction that Romero does so well. A truly fantastic film with an equally terrific score by Goblin.
What the hell are they?
They're us, that's all.
Okay, coming in at number 2 now is Creepshow. George Romero teams up with Stephen King once again to make what is, for my money, the greatest horror anthology film of all time. In almost every interview I've ever seen with George, he has cited EC Comics as one of his earliest influences.
It was, I was under the blankets. I was always reading EC comic books, Tales from the Crypt and those.
And, I guess from having been weaned on EC comic books and things like that.
And this movie is a love letter to those early horror comics. It plays out exactly like those old creepers, featuring morality tales ripped from the pages of a comic book, wherein the bad guy gets comeuppance at the end. With the exception of one story, The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, which stars King and is played strictly for laughs. There are 5 stories in total, told with a sardonic black sense of humor and a wink of the eye, as well as a really fun little wraparound story that stars Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, with Tom Atkins playing his father. This features a terrific score by John Harrison that is honestly one of my favorite movie scores. Top-notch stuff here, and on my short list for favorite films of all time.
Creepshow.
All right, coming in at number 1, you know what it is, the one and only Night of the Living Dead. This is the seminal George Romero film, a 1968 black and white indie film shot on a minuscule budget that would become one of the most influential films in horror history. It tells the story of a group of survivors holed up in a rickety farmhouse, surrounded by hordes of dead people mysteriously brought back to life, seeking to consume the flesh of the living. The viewer is left to decide which is the true horror, the shambling dead creatures or the frightened survivors, confronting their own frail emotions of distrust, fear, anger, and greed. Romero made a bold choice in Leading Man with Dwayne Jones, a black actor, at a time when all white faces was the norm in casting. Romero has repeatedly gone on record as saying Jones was the best actor, and that's why he got the job. I very much believe Romero, and I think it's a disservice to Jones to minimize his talent to suggest he got the part because of the color of his skin. He is a gifted actor and turns in a powerhouse performance in this one. But Romero couldn't help but be aware of what he was doing and that there could be possibly backlash to it. And to his credit, he didn't give a damn. He cast the best actor in the part, and the film is all the better for it. He didn't change a word of the script, contrary to an article I read recently. He's gone on record in interviews saying time and again he didn't change the script at all. Just let it play out because, in his mind, it didn't matter. Night of the Living Dead doesn't look or feel like any film before it. and is in many ways a harbinger of a switch to the modern era of filmmaking. It has an almost documentary feel to it, in large part because of the TV announcers and film crews appearing throughout, narrating the action, one of which is good old Chilly Billy Cardille, making it seem like a precursor to the found footage films. The flesh-eating scenes were shocking in its day as well, and the film is an overall indie triumph, inspiring a legion of filmmakers over the years to pick up a camera and try their hand at storytelling. So that's it, Fright fans, my countdown of the films of George Romero from worst to first. And when I say that, I'm using that very loosely. Even the worst George Romero film is better than some filmmakers' best film. To have a fistful, 5 movies that are absolutely perfect films, those top 5 films, I wouldn't change a thing in them. That is a hell of a resume, and George Romero is a hell of a movie maker. I want to thank you, George. This is our salute to you. I want to thank you for the hours and hours of entertainment that you give me. I love watching your movies. I pull them out regularly and rewatch them, and I wish that you could see this. I was happy that I got to meet you once in Louisville at Wonderfest, and I have to tell all of you, I asked George at the time what his favorite movie was, which is a stupid question to ask, but I did. And you know what he told me? Martin. So, kind of interesting. It's definitely one of his more personal films, and it is one that is supposed to come out on Blu-ray soon, very soon here. So let's hope that happens. But I think it's not U.S. I don't think it's Region 1, so give me a reason to finally go get that all-region player. Anyway, enough of this. Hope you guys enjoyed this countdown. Click that like button if you did. Stay tuned for more stuff here in the coming weeks. I'll have more countdowns, reviews, and other fun stuff. Until next time, this is Dr. Gangrene here from the lab saying, stay mad, and all hail George Romero, King of the Zombies.